So the investor profile for the living sector, which is built-to-rent, co-living, student housing, and whatnot, is changing really across Europe. What we're seeing is more institutional investors coming in. So we have sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, insurance companies, but equally family offices, high net worth individuals. And I think what's happening is as the industry progresses, you're starting to see what the returns can look like, and it's becoming more accessible. So as these new capital come into the markets, in some cases they've been investors in either North America or other parts of the world, and now they're seeing that, oh, this sector is starting to evolve, whether it's the UK or across Europe, and it's really picking up. So we as a consultancy are doing a lot of work. We're based in London, but we do a lot of work all across Europe. And for the last few years, we've been doing a lot of work in Spain, and for whatever reason, Spain has been a bit of a hot spot for living sector, and we see a lot of the big private equity firms, the usual names that we all know, in Spain. But in the last 2 years, 3 years, we're seeing more and more in Portugal. We're here at this conference in Portugal. Seeing more in Italy. We have a new client in Cyprus. We're seeing this type of living sector interest in the Middle East as well. So not only is the investor profile changing, but the geography is changing pretty dramatically. Yeah, I mean, planning is one of the big ones that gets referenced the most. And I guess the way I think about it is you've got, whether it's UK or really anywhere across Europe, so you've got government agencies, jurisdictions that are defining what can be developed and how it can be developed. And oftentimes there's a disconnect in our view between that and what the market really wants or is looking for. And so a very good example, like in the UK, there's over 300 councils that basically define what can be developed. So imagine, UK is a big country, but it's not as big as the US. You've got 300 different agencies with their own agendas and their own people who work within the councils, all of whom are trying to come up with housing policy, and maybe that's not their background or their expertise. And so it's not unusual where we look at a potential development, using the UK as an example, and we know that through our market research, we know that there's a lot of demand for one-bedroom units and maybe some studio units and smaller units and whatnot. And the council might come back and say, oh, well, we want more family housing. This is just kind of a thing they have in mind. But we know from our consultancy and our market research, the demand really isn't so much for family housing. Family housing, or sometimes they're going into houses or going into townhomes or different format of residential. And yet there's this disconnect between the two. So that's a huge obstacle. That's number one. I could go on and on. But and the other is matching up the capital with the types of opportunities. And the best capital long-term is institutional capital, like an insurance company, for example, that wants 10-year horizon or 20-year horizon. A family office oftentimes falls into that category as well. And that matches up really nicely. If you have a BTR project or a co-living project, it's a great long-term asset. It's got really stable, steady cash flow in and out of economic cycles and whatnot. But the reality is, to get a lot of these things launched and off the ground, you need those shorter-term investors, the private equity guys, or the kind of more expensive capital to get these projects launched. So it's kind of figuring out how to marry up the cost of capital, the type of capital providers with the opportunities, and that's just a process of working its way through. I'm here in Porto at the Recharge conference. Last 2 days have been great. There was a property tour all day yesterday afternoon, and then a series of sessions today and panelists and speakers. It's been a really, really kind of diverse group, but not such a large audience that we couldn't get to know each other and really spend more quality time together. Sometimes these conferences are so vast that you actually don't meet as many people when they're too big. So I've found it great, and I was really excited to learn that Recharge basically rotates around to different markets across Europe. So it'll definitely be on my agenda for next year.